All right, 1 o'clock. What day is it? Thursday? Is that right? Thursday? Yeah, I think it's Thursday. Thursday, 1 o'clock. Time for some English composition class, English composition and grammar. And we're going to do something a little different today because if we look at the composition book, we find that the next topic that comes up is oral composition, and it asks students to actually share some information with the class. So I'm not going to ever call on anybody because when I was a student, I hated when teachers did that. I'm never going to call on you and make you do stuff. When I was a student, I usually wanted the teachers to just leave me alone. I was willing to study and learn, but I really didn't want to be bothered with all kinds of goofy class activities. So if somebody would like to help out, I'll give you a chance to do so, and I trust that someone will like to. But the next topic in English composition is just getting into composition itself, right? Learning how to do composition work, and we have to move from just studying and learning about composition to actually starting to practice it. All right, let me just keep letting folks in here. So we're going to get to this issue where we've got to start practicing this stuff. We can't just talk about composition all day long. We've got to actually start working on it. And the way to start, if you were paying attention to the lessons, the way to start with composition is by speaking, not by writing, but by speaking, because speaking is much easier for us. It's much more pleasant for us. And it's better to learn to speak than to write. Now, I'm going to start today by giving you some advice. If you're interested in becoming a good writer, and not just a writer, because writing is only one way of communicating, but if you're interested in learning how to communicate well, I'm going to give you some advice that will help you. And it will help you to become a good writer. It'll help you in a million different ways. And I'd like you to take me up on this advice and try it out, or at least practice it, if you will. I don't know how much you know about what I do for a living, but I spend all of my time teaching and writing, and I used to write a lot more. And now, at this point in my life, I don't write as much as I used to. I speak a lot more. I speak a lot more. So I do videos and speaking and interviews and talks and stuff like that. And I don't write as much as I used to write. Normally, I'll speak and give a talk or something like that, and then the talk will be transcribed for me and turned into print and becomes an article or something. But I don't do much time writing, and it's good because I'm not very good at typing, so it was always a pain in the neck for me to type stuff. But I do a lot of speaking and recording and talking and things like that. And what I've found is that since I've stopped writing and focused more on talking, I've actually produced a lot better stuff in terms of writing. Like the articles that get published, I don't actually write them. They're actually made from my talks, and they're more effective and more successful than things that I would sit down and write because they have more of a conversational feel to them and they're easier to read. And so I've learned that just like this book teaches, I didn't have the opportunity to study this book when I was your age. I had, the kinds of terrible composition classes that this book talks about. That's what I had when I was a teenager. I hated to write because I just felt like I didn't understand what I was supposed to do. And I would submit my writing to my teacher, and my teacher would give a grade. And I felt like the teacher just pulled my grade out of a hat. I had no idea where the grades even came from. And I didn't like writing. Most kids feel that way. This textbook, though, teaches us very well and gives us a class that actually works. But my point is I've learned now that I'm older, and just the way my work is, I have to talk a lot more and write a lot less. And I found that talking more and writing less actually makes me write better when I do write. And I usually start with talking. So for example, if someone sends me a question, they want me to talk about a topic or answer a question or solve a problem, I used to sit down to write an article or write a response to them. And I never do that anymore. Now, when people ask me a question or ask me to talk about a topic or do something, I'll say, you know what I'll do? I'll record a talk on that, and I'll answer your question through a talk or through a video, and then I can give you the video. Now think of all the options I have. I can record a video, I can give them a video, I can take the audio out of the video and give them something to listen to, like a podcast. Um, I can have the video transcribed where a software program will type it for me, will just listen to me talk and type it, and then all I have to do is edit it. So by doing a talk on a video, I get a video, an audio file, and a typed article, all from doing one thing. And it's actually the easiest thing to do, which is just talk. So I've learned over time to use technology to just talk and then let all of the other stuff take care of itself. And it's made me a better writer as well, because I always start by talking. And in this textbook, because as I said, this is a really great composition textbook, it doesn't start by having you write, it actually starts by having you speak. And I would recommend that as well. Now, in your generation, I don't know what you have access to because your families and lives are all different, but we've got devices like phones, like I've got a smartphone in front of me here. This thing, this goofy smartphone, this thing is a video camera, a regular camera, an audio recorder. It uploads videos, uploads audio, it does everything. It's like a portable communication studio that does everything. And these are the kinds of tools we have nowadays. But most kids who get them waste them, just like playing games and doing dopey chat stuff like that. Like they don't use them for the power that's actually in these things. But what I'd recommend is either whether you're using a computer or you have access to a tablet or a phone, whatever, think about how these tools can actually help you to do responsible things. Don't just look at them as a way to find entertainment, because they offer you so many benefits and they're just wasted by most kids. Most parents will criticize, all this stuff because not because of the things themselves, but because of the dopey things that kids do with them, and they waste them rather than make good use of them. But I would encourage you to learn to talk and record yourself, or make videos and record yourself, because you can study your own communication. You can study yourself as a person on video, as a person speaking in a recording, and so on, and focus on working on that, because there are software programs that can take your spoken words and transcribe them into written work for you, and it's your work. So if you had an essay due or something like that, you can just speak the whole thing, hit a button to transcribe it, and then just do some editing and clean it up, and you've got a finished essay, and you didn't type a single word. So there's lots of different ways to handle the work of writing, and I encourage you to learn to be creative and use the technology to help you, because it's very powerful. In this lesson today, we get to the point in our textbook, and I'm going to share my screen now. We get to the point in this textbook where we come to an oral composition. So we're going to start getting going with composition, not learning about composition anymore, but we need to practice it, because that's how you learn an art. You learn an art by studying the principles of the art and then by practicing. And if you don't practice, you're always going to stink at everything. You've got to learn the principles, and then you've got to practice them. Practice won't help you if you don't learn the principles. You've got to do both. You've got to learn the principles, and then you've got to practice. And when you practice, you've got to practice the principles, not just do stuff. So we've got to do both. We've got to study the principles, learn what we should do from experienced people, and then we've got to practice those principles. Now, let me just ask you to, in the chat, how many of you have taken piano lessons or any kind of music lessons, violin, piano, voice, whatever? How many of you have taken a music lesson? And I don't mean you went to, the world's greatest music school. Maybe you had Uncle Frank teach you some music lessons. I don't know. But how many of you have had experience with music lessons? You don't have to tell me about it, just let me know if you have. Okay, so most kids have had some experience with a music lesson. And usually the lesson that they mess around with first is the piano. All right. Yeah, most people take piano lessons. Okay, now I want you to think about your piano lesson because it's very important. When you start thinking about the piano, you start thinking about playing music, right? You start thinking about what songs you'd like to play, or you start banging on a piano, trying to playing songs that you've heard before. Maybe you play like the melody of a song and you think you're Mozart because you can make something that sounds like the Star Wars, theme song or something like that. But when you actually have a piano teacher who knows what they're doing, if you get a good piano teacher, what's the first thing that they teach you? What's the first lesson? Do you remember what your first lesson was? What was your first lesson? The names of the keys? Is that what you mean, Xavier? What were the first lessons that you learned? Key letters and numbers, keys. I'm going to bet that you're not even thinking far enough back, and that there were lessons before that, like how to sit at the piano, right? Your piano teacher might have taught you how to sit at the piano, where to put the piano bench. They might have taken some time to make sure that you were high enough. Maybe they stuck a phone book under your bottom to get you up high enough to reach the keyboard, things like that. How to sit, where to put your hands, how to hold your fingers above the keys. So what I want you to think about is when you start piano lessons, the teacher is thinking about all kinds of practical things because of their experience. They're thinking about all kinds of practical things, and the student is thinking, when do I start to play songs? When do I get to play songs? That's what the student thinks about. The student imagines himself, sitting around playing all his favorite songs. The teacher's like, sit up straight, put your fingers over the keys, curl your fingers like you're holding a ball, slide the piano bench closer, get up a little higher. And nobody wants to talk about that stuff. But ultimately, if you don't get that right, if you don't get your position at the piano right, you're not going to be able to play anything. So the teacher knows what they're doing. The kids are usually looking forward to do things that they can't possibly do. So what I want you to see, yeah, good. So that your grandmother put a box under your feet. Yeah, there's all kinds of tricks and tips and things that teachers use to help you with those things. But what I want you to see is that you're taught principles first. You're taught ways to do things first. And then when you practice, when it's time to practice, if you don't practice those things, the teacher will stop you and say, no, 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 no. We're not just banging on the keys. We're not just doing whatever we want. I told you how to sit. I told you how to hold your arms. I told you where to put the bench. I told you where to put your fingers. You need to practice those things. And so the practice has to be principled practice. You have to practice the principles. And when you start, none of the principles are natural. None of them are normal. You have to think about them, and then you have to practice them. And it's very, very slow. And this is what I want you to focus on. When you get started with practice, you have to move very, very slowly. Every kid wants to go fast, right? But you have to start very slowly, because we're not just concerned with what you need to do. We're not just concerned with what you need to do. We're also concerned with how you need to do it. Not just what, but also how. There's a right way to do it. And what happens is you don't have experience. You don't know what to do. You don't know how to play music. The teacher does. And the teacher knows what you're going to need to do in the long run to have success. And so they start to teach that to you at the beginning. And they don't want you to fall into bad habits. And every kid who gets started on a piano thinks that they already know what they need to do. And the teacher says, no, no, you need to sit back up like I showed you. You need to put your hands where I showed you. You need to move your fingers the exact way that I showed you to move your fingers, because later on, your way is not going to work. It may work on lesson one, but it's not going to work in the future. You need to learn to do it my way. And if you learn to do it my way, there's going to be no limit to what you can do in the future. And that's the benefit of having a good teacher. They have experience, they know all of the difficulties that come up down the road, and they can teach you the ways to do things from the beginning that allow you to miss out on those problems and avoid those problems. So that's the benefit of having a teacher. The key, though, that I want you to focus on is practice needs to start slowly. Every kid wants to run and just tear into everything, but you need to learn. We study principles, and then you need to practice the principles. You need to be thoughtful in your practice, and you need to start slow and be patient until you learn to actually put the principles into practice, get comfortable with them, and then after you get comfortable, what happens? It becomes automatic. We have what's called muscle memory, where once you train yourself to do it the right way, that just becomes the way that you do it. And that's the goal of practice, to not just do something, but to learn to do it in the right way and train and train and train until that becomes the normal way you do it. And it's just your fingers and your body just know what to do because you've practiced the right way so often. So that's how good practice works. So some people say practice makes perfect, and we say, no, that's not true. Perfect practice makes perfect. So we've got to study the principles, and then we've got to practice. But when we practice, we have to focus on practicing the principles, okay? And that's true in piano, that's true in sports. If you've played any sports and had any training, you've got to learn the techniques, learn the principles, and then practice slowly, focusing on those principles. And when you start to get the principles figured out, then you can start to move more quickly. It becomes more natural, more comfortable, and you can move before. Yeah, with baseball is a good example. Every sport has technique you have to learn. And if you don't listen to the coach, you're just always going to stink. It doesn't matter how much you practice or how much you play. If you don't learn to do it the right way, it's not going to work. So we have to practice with good principle, okay? Yeah, any area, any skill, any art, they all work the same. Okay. Now, when it comes to composition, so let's focus on composition now. Composition is more important than any of these things we've named, by the way, more important than sports, more important than music, because we don't all need to play music. We don't all need to play sports or even drive cars, but we do all need to communicate. And so this skill that we study in composition, it's not just writing, it's just communication in general. And it's one of the most important skills that there is, period. No matter what you're going to do, it's a skill that's going to determine how far you're able to go with what you want to do by communication. So we've been learning some principles. And if I scroll back through these lessons, we've just learned a few of the first lessons. We learned about pleasure in expressing ideas. We learned that it's pleasurable to speak and share ideas. And we have lots of interesting things to say because we have unique experiences. So we learned about this idea of speaking from our experiences because our experiences are unique. That was the first thing. We talked about sources of ideas. We learned that there are 3 sources of ideas. Who can tell me what the sources of ideas are? You can type them. You can type all 3, or you can just type 1. What are the sources of ideas for composition? Where do our ideas come from? You can use abbreviations, that's fine. Good, I see all 3 of them. Good. Experience, that is our own experience, things that we actually see and do and experience. That's our first source of ideas. That's good. Second, our own imagination, which is connected to our experience because we can't imagine things that are completely separate from our experiences. And then thirdly, language, which is learning about other people's experiences, learning about other people's imaginations, and we can gather all kinds of ideas from these different sources. Good. So 3 sources of ideas: our experience, our imagination, and other people's experience and imagination. So 3 sources. Then we learned about why it's best to express ideas that we gain from experience. Who can tell me why it's best to share ideas that come from our experience? Go ahead, give me some ideas. Why is it best to share ideas from our own experience? Good, you've got all the right things coming through. That's good. Okay. They're unique because our experiences are unique, right? Therefore, what we talk about is automatically unique because our experience is unique. We're able to get into the details and talk about it very carefully. We can answer questions about it because we can remember all of those details. And because they're our experiences, we can talk about them very comfortably. We don't have to use other people's words. We don't have to share something that we read about or that we heard someone else talk about. We can just talk about it comfortably and freely in our own language because it's our experience. So good. So those are advantages of expressing ideas gained from experience. Now, one thing I want to talk about real quick before we go forward, one thing I just thought of as we were talking about experience. You may sit there and say, I don't think my experiences are unique. My life's pretty boring. I'm a 12-year-old kid. I do the same things every other 12-year-old kid does. What do? I wash the dishes, I clean my room, I do my schoolwork, I go to church. It doesn't sound very unique to me. It sounds pretty boring. Who'd want to hear about my experience? Well, that's not really what it means when it talks about your experience being unique. And I want you to think about what actually makes your experience unique. There are all different details of your life that are different. For example, just looking at the kids who are here, I know that some of your parents come from different countries. They speak different languages. They have all different kinds of careers and professions. You live in different places. You live in different kinds of houses. Some of you have just maybe one brother or sister. Some of you might have 50 brothers and sisters, and you're in a big, huge Catholic family that's crazy. There's all different situations. So even though if you just think about your experience, you might think that the stuff that you do is pretty plain, pretty normal. But all of the details are unique. Okay, you see that? All of the details are unique. Some of you may have lots of money in your family. Some of you may have no money in your family. You might eat, peanut butter sandwiches for Easter dinner. You don't have any money. That's just how life goes sometimes. But all of those differences, all of those different circumstances are what make your life and your activities unique. Your experience is unique. You might not think about that, but it makes it unique. So for example, it might be interesting to say, so you wash the dishes in your family. Well, you might wash the dishes in a different way than my family washes the dishes. So even though you say, well, I just wash the dishes, the way you wash the dishes might be different. You might live in a different place where you have different kinds of water. And so the method you use to wash the dishes is a little bit different than another place. Some people may wash dishes by hand. Other people have dishwashers that wash it. Some people may have a lady who visits the house and washes the dishes. All different kinds of ways to wash the dishes. So even if you feel like your experiences are normal, the details of them are not the same, and that's what makes them unique. So I'm not talking about experience like, oh yeah, yesterday I climbed Mount Everest, and then tomorrow I'm going under the ocean in a submarine, and then maybe we'll ride in a barrel over Niagara Falls. Yeah, my experience is pretty interesting. That's not what it means. It means that your experiences, they always have unique details of the circumstances, and they are unique. Okay, so just understand what the book means when it teaches these things. Okay, not just the activity itself, because we're human beings. Obviously, we all have to do the same things. But we do them in all different ways and different circumstances with all different details. And that's what makes our experiences different. Okay, so just understand what it's talking about when it says you have unique experiences. They are unique. Okay, so we talked about the different sources of ideas, and we talked about why it's good for us to talk from experience because we can share all the details. It's easy to talk about. And it's automatically unique because our experiences are unique. Okay, that's that. Moving on, I think there was one more lesson. We talked about essentials of expression, and I said that there were two things necessary. Two things necessary, two essentials of expression. What were they? Two essentials. What were these two things? Two things that were necessary when we communicate. Two things necessary, two essentials. What are they? Give me some ideas. All right, very good. Damien nailed it right off the bat. Don't worry about typos. We have to type fast in chats. It's okay. If you read anything that I write, you know my writing is usually filled with typos. It's just because we don't have time to edit. That's okay. All right, say what you mean and say it clearly. Good. Have something to say and say it well. We talked about that last week. If you weren't in that class last week, you can go watch the video, right? Have something to say. Think about what you want to say, or go do something that gives you something to say. And then when you say it well. Those are the two essentials of expression. So after we study that, we come to this first oral composition. So our first actual exercise in composition, all right? And if we look at this assignment here, it says report orally. So it's not asking us to write anything. It's just asking us to speak. And it says report orally on one of the following topics. And it gives us this list of topics. Report orally on one of the following. Were you so interested in anything yesterday that you told it to your parents or friends? Was there something that you were so interested in that you shared with somebody else? If so, tell the class about it. Topic number 2, tell about something that you have done this week. Tell about something you've done this week, so the class may know exactly what you did. Number 3, name some things in which you have been interested within the last 2 or 3 months. Tell the class about one of them. So if you started something new, or you've started to do something over the last few months, you've really given your attention to this thing. Tell the class about one of these things and try to be exact in your explanation. Or number 4, tell the class about something that happened during vacation. Tell the class about something that happened during vacation, and then ask yourself, have you told the event exactly as it occurred? So we have this first oral composition exercise, and we're asked to share orally on one of these topics. I really don't want to talk about any of them in particular, but just in general, it's share something that you've done, with the class and try to describe it. Remember, this is practice for composition. So we're not asking you just to babble whatever pops into your head. We're asking you to think about the lessons that we've learned. Think about especially the last lesson, right? Essentials of expression. Have something to say, have something that you want to say, and say it well. That's the challenge of composition. So if I were to ask one of you to go ahead and volunteer to do this, and I'm not doing that yet, so just relax. If I were to ask one of you to volunteer to do this, I don't want you just to talk and then that's it. I want you to be willing to share something, respond to one of these topics, talk about something you did, but realize that you're doing it for your own sake. Okay, you're doing it for your sake to learn how to become better at composition. So when you do share something and you're done, you might think to yourself, oh my goodness, that was so terrible. I forgot half the stuff that I wanted to even talk about. And when I talked about it, I mentioned this thing that was distracting and that didn't even make any sense. And then I forgot what I was talking about and had to go back. Well, that's what you want to learn. You want to pay attention to your own experience as you start to practice speaking and writing and composition in general. Pay attention to yourself. That's the purpose of these exercises. I don't think you're going to share a story that wins any awards, if I ask you to share something. That's not why we're doing this. I'm not really interested in your story anyway. This is an exercise for your own benefit. So if you share something, if you share one of these topics, when you're finished sharing, what I want you to do is think to yourself, did I explain that exactly as I should have. And if you didn't, I want you to think about what happened, what went wrong. Why did you get distracted? Why did you forget about what you wanted to talk about? Why do you think it was boring? What could you have done to make it better? That's the whole purpose of these exercises. Okay. The whole purpose of these exercises is for you to think about your own composition and just get better. So it doesn't matter if you stink. It doesn't matter if it's boring. It doesn't matter if you got distracted. It's good for you to learn what your problems are so you can start working to fix them. That's the goal. It's about you getting better at composition. Okay. And that's why you shouldn't be afraid. It doesn't matter what, Zoriana thinks about, or Xavier, or it doesn't matter what they think, right? What matters is that you come away from this exercise and you have experience with composition, and you can start to judge yourself and get better in your speaking and writing. That's the goal, okay? So don't worry too much about what other people, it is obviously important because they're the audience, right? But you're just learning. You're not a professional. You're not getting paid to do this. You're just learning. So the focus of what you do should be on getting better. And each time you share, think about that one thing that you did wrong the last time and try not to do it the second time. Think about the one thing that you think was awkward and try to avoid that the next time. Think about the one thing that caused you to mess up the last time and try to avoid it. You say, oh, I got real nervous and I couldn't think. Okay, well, then the next time you do it, try to think about why you're getting nervous and don't get nervous anymore. Okay, so that's the whole point. It's to try to figure out what your problems are, learn what your weaknesses are, and learn to overcome them over time by practicing more and more and more. So that's the goal. I don't want you to be nervous about stuff. I don't want you to think this is some kind of performance. It's not a recital. This isn't, we're not paying to hear your amazing stories. It's a composition class. And the purpose of this is to get better. Okay. It's like baseball practice. It's okay if you try something in practice and mess up. That's the point of practice. In the game, we don't want to mess up. That's why we use practice to try and get better at new things. Okay. So that's the spirit that I want you to have. No fear, no worries about criticism. Usually the only people who criticize are the people who are too scared to do it themselves. So just ignore those people. All right. So what I'd like to ask is if there's anybody who has something they'd like to share, something that they did, and you see the topics here. You went on a vacation, you'd like to share something you did this week, something you're interested in. But listen, before you start, the essentials of expression, right? The essentials of expression. You need to have something to say. Have something to say and say it well. And by say it well, the first thing we mean is talk about it and describe it with some detail to make it clear, okay? Have something to say and say it well. I don't want you to volunteer, and then when I let you talk, you start with, we don't want to sit here while you figure out what to say. The first essential is have something to say. Okay, so no one wants to watch you figure out what to say. So if you're not sure what you want to talk about, just relax and listen. Okay, if you've got something that you'd like to talk about, if you've already done this assignment and you already know what you want to talk about, that's what I would recommend. Someone who already knows what they want to talk about. And remember, I want you to try to explain it as clearly as possible. All right, so calm yourself down, think about the details, think about a beginning, a middle, and an end of what you're going to explain, and try to explain it clearly, okay? And then I'll follow up with some questions and some comments to try to help you get better and try to help everybody get better. So even if you're not speaking, I want you to pay attention, not to criticize the person, but to think about what you notice about what they do and how you can learn from it and get better. That's the only thing that matters, is that you learn from your experience and get better. Okay, so if anybody wants to share something, why don't you tell me real quick what you'd like to talk about, and I'll pick somebody to go, and we'll see how many of these we get through, because we've only got, I don't know, a little bit of time. We'll see what we get through. Last Christmas. All right, Damien, you want to go here? You look like you're chomping at the bit, ready to go here. I'll give you a chance here. So Damien, you're gonna share with us something that you did last Christmas. Report orally. So give us, tell us the story about what you did last Christmas, okay? Good. You can unmute yourself and get started. Go ahead.
Okay. So last Christmas, a catalog came into the mail, and when I looked at the catalog, it had a very, very good motorbike. It was blue. I loved it since blue is one of my favorite colors. So I asked my mom to buy it, but she kept saying, "Oh no, you're gonna crack your head. Oh, it's gonna ruin up the lawn." And I did not like that. And I kept begging and begging, and it was Christmas week, and I still hadn't had any signs of a motorbike box. I started to get worried, and on Christmas Eve, my heart was thumping, and after every Christmas Eve we have a party, and after the party, when I went to bed, I woke up at 12, and I couldn't go back to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
So I stayed up to 12 until 6 o'clock. And my mom is very strict, so I couldn't even go down 6 o'clock, like maybe a lot of normal kids. So I had to stay up there till 7:30, and I had to wait for my grandparents to come, and then finally, when I was able to come down, I saw the same motorbike. I gave a scream of triumph, jumped on my bike, but before I could even enjoy or ride it, I had to go open the other presents and wait. After watching the rest of a movie that we were watching at the party, my mom said I might try to ride it. So in my pajamas, I drove it outside, got on my helmet, and was about to pull back that little lever thing that makes it to go. I don't know what you call that, but I was about to pull it when my mom said, "Oh, you're gonna freeze out there. It's like 26." Before she could answer, though, I just drove off. But that was the best Christmas ever.
Okay, great. Thank you. Great. Okay, so there we go. We've got Damien's story of his Christmas experience with his motorbike. That was great. Okay, so now what I want all of you to think about, and especially you, Damien, now you don't get a chance to really think about it. One of the cool things for you, Damien, is if you watch this video again, that's going to be in the video. So everybody who watches this video is going to get your Christmas story. All right. So you have a chance, and this is what's helpful for you. You can watch the video and see yourself tell the story, and you can learn from your own experience and watch yourself. Okay, so that's great. All right, now, what I want you to think about, Damien, and what I want the others of you to think about is, did you have something to say? Right, that's the first essential. That's the first thing we're trying to focus on. Did you have a story to tell? Did you have something to say? And then when you look back at what you said, did you say it well? Did you say it well? Okay, so Damien, you're really the only one who can judge your own story because you're the only one who knows all the details. So you have to judge that for yourself, right? But those of you who were watching, if you were watching, you might say, oh, I thought it was good how he did this or how he did this, and I thought it was bad how he did this. I didn't like when he did. So you can learn by watching other people's sharing their stories. You can start to think about things that you would like to try to avoid that you see them do that you don't want to do, or things that you want to imitate, things that you'd like to do because you see someone else do it and you think it's actually helpful. So you can learn from watching other people's experience. But again, we're not watching to judge or criticize somebody else's experience, because nobody cares what you think as a judge. The purpose of our activities in this class, it's going to be so you can learn to make your own composition better. That's the goal. So you can learn by this experience to make your own composition better. So Damien, that was great. Thank you. That's a great story. You did very well setting up the event and then getting into all the details. You shared all of your emotions and things like that. We now know that your mother's very strict and she wouldn't let you downstairs until 7:30 in the morning. So that was great. All the details were great. I got a kick out of the story because I can remember I had a similar experience. I wanted a bike when I was like 12 years old. It was very expensive. And my parents decided to play a trick on me. And actually, they bought it for me. And then they hid it on Christmas morning just to tease me. And so I opened up all my boring presents. And I was, trying to be thankful, but I was disappointed. And then afterwards, they told me that they actually got me the bike. And so it was a happy ending. But anyway, anybody else want to share a story? Anybody else want to take a chance? Who's me? Xavier? All right, we'll give these Ozevec boys a chance to both go here. All right, Xavier, you're up.
All right. I have a story on how I caught a possum.
Right, hey, and let me just warn you one thing, Damien. We're going to ask you if Xavier is telling the truth. Okay, so pay attention. All right, go ahead, Xavier.
Okay, so one day in like the forest or whatever, I had found this trap in my grandparents' house. So I asked my grandparents if I could, use it and keep it, because he was just keeping it under his porch or something.
Right.
Something random. So then he said okay, and I took it home, and I just kept it under my porch for months too, until one day I figured I could maybe take it out and use it. So me and Damien I'm gonna give him credit. Me and Damien took it out and we brought it into our forest little thing with some rotten vegetables from our garden and an empty sardine can, and we put them in the trap. And then about a week later, when I was eating breakfast, I could hear Damien and my sister Violet just yelling. And so I walked over to the door and I heard this strange hiss outside. So then I went over, and right by our door, which was glass, I could see this big furry thing pressed against the cage. I couldn't see exactly what it was, but I could see a big rat tail hanging out from it. So then I ran over to it, and Damon said that we had caught a possum, which was really cool. So we took it in the garden, and it was really angry, and it was hissing and scratching and stuff. So then our mother called our grandfather over to try to let it out. And I did not try to train it, and so our grandfather helped us get it out with a stick because it was one of those opening, closing cages, traps. But it just wouldn't go out, and we stood there for 20-30 minutes trying to get it out, and it still wouldn't go. And our neighbor who was on a walk kept offering to help, but so then he just left it open and tried to and we went in, and then it left. The end.
The end. Okay, great. So we've got Xavier's story about his possum trap. Now, let me ask you, everybody here. Think about these two stories that have been shared, okay? Did you notice, and both of you guys did a great job, thank you. Did you notice that in each of their stories, there was a beginning, and then the story went along, and we got to a middle of the story, and then we got to the end of the story. Okay, so there was a beginning, middle, and end. Both of them did a good job because they didn't wander all over the place with some crazy story and then remember details and go back and confuse. They were very easy to follow, very simple stories. Okay, so that was good. Now, Damien and Xavier, you're the only ones who know all the details of those events. So you have to think about what you shared. And again, because you shared in the live class here, you can watch it actually on video. As you watch it, you can ask, did I share all the details? Did I leave any details out? Should I have explained it in a different way? You know, Damien was sort of commenting as you were telling the story, filling us in with some of the background details, like your desire to train it and things like that. But you know, you can think about whether you added all the details that you wanted to, and that's why just getting experience like this, watching yourself, listening to yourself, you can start to pay attention and think about things that you can get better at over time. And that's the goal. Okay. The goal is just to get better. And even if you're not comfortable sharing, and again, you don't have to share. I don't care about that. Some of you can learn better just by paying attention and watching and listening to other people. That's fine. What I want you to do is, as you, even if you're just watching, pay attention to how they tell the stories, pay attention to what they say, how they talk, all these different details, and just draw from it lessons that you can practice when you do talk to people, because obviously you have to talk to people every day, right? You've got 1,000 different opportunities to practice these things. But make use of these opportunities to watch and observe other people and learn from them good things they do and also bad things they do, things to imitate and things to try to avoid. Okay, so that's great. We don't have any more time today for more, but we're going to have opportunities to do these kinds of exercises all throughout this book as we study it. So now you kind of see how we can practice these oral compositions when we get together. We can't do that in online classes, so this is another reason why it's good to have live classes. But thanks, Damien and Xavier, for being willing to take the first shots at this. And in the future, you know, the others of you, you can sort of prepare yourself to do so in future classes. Okay, so we've got 2 examples, 2 good stories for us to think about and learn from. Damien and Xavier, you guys need to think about your own experience speaking, because that, you know, those of us listening didn't have the experience to actually do the storytelling. You did. So think about what you said, how you said it, and so on. Try to get better the next time. And then when we do go next time, I'll give an opportunity for others to volunteer. And I promise you, you don't have to be nervous. I'm going to try to help you. We're not going to, you know, we might pick on you a little bit just because it's fun, but we're going to try to help each other. So don't be nervous. I'm not going to promise and say I won't pick on you, because I will, because it's fun. But you know what I mean. We're not going to be critical or nasty about it. We're going to have fun doing this, and the goal is just to get better. So in the future, if you'd like to volunteer, I'm going to start with someone else, and I'm going to save those who have already volunteered for last. I'm going to save them for last, so you'll have a chance if you want to. And if nobody wants to, well, then we'll just let Damien and Xavier run the show, and we'll just watch them and learn from their stories and reports. Okay, so that's it. So thank you for volunteering. Remember, have something to say, and say it well. That's the goal. You can always find ways to say things and communicate things better than you did before. So you can never, ever say, I think I'm done with this. You can always get better. And also, like I said last week, you're in control of your experiences. You're in control of your experiences. Sometimes your experiences just come to you, but I talked about how Dante and Virgil and other great writers from history would actually go and do things for the sake of being able to gain experiences that they could then write about, talk about, and so on. Okay, so think about your experiences, what you choose to do with your time, and how it helps you to to communicate with others. So that's all for today. Just some experience with some oral composition exercises, a review of what we studied so far. Next week, we'll either do the same thing. If some of you are interested in volunteering next week, I'll ask you at the beginning of class, I'll ask, does anybody want to volunteer and do what we did last week? If nobody's really interested, we'll just move on to the next lesson. If a bunch of you would like to volunteer, then we'll take some more time for these oral composition exercises, but we'll see next week what we do. All right. Next week is the last week before spring break. So next week we'll have a full week of school, and then March 31st is the last week. March 31st is the last day of the winter term, and then we're going to take 2 weeks off. There won't be any live classes for 2 weeks after that, for all of Holy Week and the week after Easter, and then we'll come back and start back up the second week after Easter. Okay, so 1 more week of studies, and then we take Easter break. So that's all for today. If you don't have any questions, you're free to go. If you do have questions, I'll stick around for a bit and answer any questions. And otherwise, I'll see you next week. All right. Thank you, everybody. God bless.